Hello, it's about 7 days from Black Friday. I am going to be doing some Black Friday deals later today, but before I do that, I would like to make a headphone tier list. So let's go ahead and get into it real quick. Let's make this a nice short video. So we're going to start off with build quality. So we have the Mr. Speakers Aeon Flow opens in the S tier, so S being the best and F being the worst. We have the Focal Elegia or Elegia, Focal Lear, Sende Iva, Philips Fidelio X2s and X2HRs, Fidelio L2s, and the M1 MK2s. Then we have the monoprice M1060C, Hi-Fiman HE6SE, V1, Hi-Fiman Ananda, Hi-Fiman Edition XX, Hi-Fiman 4XX, and then the monoprice M1060 opens. And then in C tier, we have the Bayer Dynamic DT1990 Pros, Philips SHP 9500s, Sennheiser 660Ss, Sennheiser 6XXs, and the Sennheiser 58Xs. And then we have the Fostech T50RP Mark IIIs, and then we have the AKG K7XXs. And then in D tier, we have the Sennheiser 598s, the 558s, the 518s, and the 560Ss. And then in E tier, we have the COS ESP95X, and we also have the COS KSC 75s. And then in F tier, we have the monoprice retros. So that's basically it for build quality. Let's go ahead and talk about a few things before we move on. So let's talk about portable cases. The Mr. Speakers comes in a portable case. It's alright quality, but I would take the Focal Elegia case is better quality. And then the Sendy Iva case would be my second favorite portable case. Mr. Speakers would be third. Fourth place, where I would say about on par. The monoprice case is about on par with the Mr. Speakers portable case. And then the worst portable case here would be the Bayer Dynamic because the outside of it is just made of cheap like rubber. But while like something like the Sendiiva is like a high quality leather portable case. Now some of these headphones also don't come with a portable case, but they do come in a box that has like foam in it. So for example, the Focal Lears has a box that comes with foam in it. The Hi-Fiman HE6SE V1 and the Hi-Fiman Ananda come in a box, but it doesn't use foam. Instead, it uses some type of blanket material. And then we also have the Sennheiser 6XX and the Sennheiser 660Ss. Excuse me, I might have to sneeze. But those also come in a box with foam inside of it. And then the only other headphone here that comes in a box with foam inside of it would be the COS ESP95X. Now in terms of stock cables, Mr. Speaker's stock cable is okay. The Elegia and the Lear stock cables actually suck because they're rubberized. It's one of the reasons why it ranks lower because it doesn't come with a portable case, and the stock cables are even worse. The Focal Elegia's stock cable is kind of similar to the Focal Elex cables. They're very stiff, but as long as you unjank them, they stay unjanked because they run in one direction. Overall, pretty good quality cables. But I would say the best cable here, stock cable, would be the Sendiiva's stock cable. By far has the best stock cable. The Philips Fidelio stock cables are pretty good. They're about equal to like the monoprice stock cables. And then these two Philips headphones, I forget what the stock cables were like. And then these three Hi-Fimans here, the stock cables on them are all the same, and they're all terrible. So these Hi-Fimans here have really bad stock cables. The 4XX stock cable is pretty good. It's like a Sennheiser or Bayer Dynamic stock cable, but it's much shorter and thicker and less kinky. Bayer Dynamic is kind of long and kinky. SHP, I forget what the cable was like, but these are like long rubberized cables. The 58X is a little shorter and it's more flat and less round of a cable, so the 58X cable is a little bit better. T50RP's, like that orange cable, is okay. The AKG's cable is very long and very janky. And then these Sennheisers are kind of like the same as these two, so they're kind of long and rubberized, not great. And these three don't have detachable cables, So these three headphones don't have a detachable cable. There's a cable extension for this headphone, but other than that, the cable doesn't detach. And they're cheap. Like the Cost one, for example, that's a very cheap cable. It's a very thin, cheap cable. And these two are very terrible as well. And then in terms of the actual build, which is how this is being ranked, now I'm not ranking these in terms of reliability. So for example, focal ears. They're known to have driver failures, like the focal Elex. Uh, these Philips headphones. I've seen some of these where this metal thingy breaks. Um, the original M1060 opens, when they first came out, they had like wood cracking, unfinished metal, MMC X connectors and whatever. Bare Dynamic, this plastic piece right here is known to break. The, you know, Fostex, this plastic piece right here where it connects to the cup, known to break. This plastic piece here is known to break. I'm not ranking these headphones by like reliability. I'm just ranking them by build quality. So initial materials. I'm ranking them by the build materials. So going by build materials, the Mr. Speakers is the best in my opinion. I'm not sure what the cups are made of, but they're not plastic, and I'm not sure if it's metal, but it's very lightweight, very elastic headband, very good quality leather strap, very good quality leather ear pads overall, and a very decent cable and whatnot. So overall, this makes it into S tier. Now my two favorites in the A tier would be the Focals, because you get good quality leather head thing. The whole headphone is made out of metal. There's no plastic anywhere. The only plastic that might be is this little piece right here that says Focal. That might be the only plastic piece. But everything else is metal. The ear pads are nice, like micro suede or like some type of cloth material or whatever you call it. Sendiaiva is very good craftsmanship. In fact, these wood cups are apparently handmade. Metal grill, elastic metal headband, good quality ear pads, leather with a nice like cloth material on it. Philips headphones made out of metal. This head strap is nice quality. The ear pads are one of the higher quality velour ear pads that you can get. Excuse me. And then you get the Philips Fidelio L2s and the MK1 MK2s. The leather is very good quality, made out of metal. The ear pads are a little cheap. The leather is not the greatest, but honestly, very solid build. Then you have the M1060Cs and these three Hi-Fi-Mins or four Hi-Fi-Mins. The head, you can see that the head straps, or not the head straps, the headbands are made out of metal, but they're like a thin spring steel type of metal. It's not going to be as solid like as this focal metal or this one or like it's not as solid as these in terms of that. But the pads are good quality. Grills are made of metal. This piece here is metal. I think around the ear cups, though, I'm not sure what the material is. The M1060C around the ear cup, that's metal for sure. While this one is wood. So yeah, these headbands are a little bit cheap. And then the straps are not terrible in quality, but also not like amazing. And we get into C tier. The Bayer is a very cheap leather here. It actually has a more solid metal underneath the headband. Metal grill, but around the cups is plastic, and then this piece here is plastic. And then the velour ear pads aren't as good quality. And it has exposed wires as well. So that's why that's a C tier. And the SHP 9500s, this leather here is about as cheap as this leather, honestly. But this head strap is actually pretty decent quality. The ear pads are decent quality. You have metal grill underneath the headband. It's metal. It's thin, but it's not it's not super cheap, but it's also not super good. I would say the Bayer Dynamic is that little sheet of metal is a bit thicker, but otherwise, yeah. These three Sennheisers rank a little higher because they have metal grills, but more importantly, they have a metal headband, and then it's covered in plastic. So this plastic piece on the top you can see, but underneath that is metal. Well, these Sennheisers, underneath that plastic is just a metal headband, or whatever you call it. The slider thing is plastic on these headphones. And the reason why the 560S is ranked lower is because it's made in China. And you can tell that the plastic quality is actually worse. And then another reason why these Sennheisers are ranked lower is that these velour, like this is cheaper velour, this is leather, this is actually a higher quality velour, but they're all glued on. While with like the 58X, the 6XX, and the 660S, they slide in and out, so they're not glued in. And the plastic on these three headphones is higher quality than these three, and then this one's slightly worse than these three. And then Fostex T50RPs, the plastic's pretty bad quality. It does have some metal here, but it's pretty flimsy plastic. And when these are stock, the ear pads are pretty cheap. Headband is cheap. And then AKG, yeah, the head strap, it's not that cheap, but the headphone is made pretty darn cheap. And actually, this is the only other headphone other than the Mr. Speakers that doesn't use a metal, headband. It uses like an elastic rubber. And then we have the costs. Basically, very cheap plastic. It's very cheap. And then the foam ear pads, when you put them on your head, they make like a crunching noise, and that bothers me. So that's very cheap. And then this energizer that it comes with is also made of plastic. It's very cheap. Honestly, it's a very cheap headphone. Cost KSC 75s. They got some metal used here, but they also got some plastic, and the cables are cheap, so that's why that's in E tier. And then Monoprice Retros, I don't really need to explain that. Very cheap, stiff leather headband with very cheap, stiff leather ear pads, and then extremely cheap plastic. Like, this is something you go to a store and you pay like $5 for. That's how cheap that is. So let's go ahead and move on to comfort. So we have the Mr. Speakers, Fostech, and the Cost K ESP95X. Now, all three of these headphones are extremely light because, well, these two in particular are made of plastic, and then this is made of some like light weight, like metal alloy or something like that. But they all have really light clamp. I'd say the Mr. Speakers clamp's a little harder, but it's pretty light. They're all very light, and when this is modified, which by the way, that's how I'm ranking the Fostech T50s, is modified, not stock. So that's with like either ZMF protein pads or Deconi pads, and then the Mr. Speakers head strap, or a Mod House head strap. Now, if it's not modified, then it would be an F tier. But if it's modified, then it's S tier. But very lightweight, and this is very good quality head strap, and this head strap would be basically the same, and they almost weigh the same. The cost is probably the lightest headphone here. That's why the headband is pretty comfortable because it's extremely light, and the ear pads fit around your ear. Nothing touches. Nothing touches. But overall, these would be S tier in terms of comfort. Now, in terms of A tier, I really like the Focal Alere and the Allegia's comfort. It's what a really good solid headphone should feel like. And it's also a more normal looking headphone as well. So you get these micro suede or microfiber cloth material ear pads or whatever it's called. Alcantara. I don't know if it's not Alcantara, but you get the point. Very good clamp force. It's not too light, not too tight. Headband. Even though these headphones weigh a little bit, the headband actually supports the top of my head pretty well. The SHP 9500's headband is probably better though, because this headphone is lighter and that headband's pretty good. And these ear pads are also pretty good. And the clamp force is alright on these as well. The only downside is that the inside of my ear can touch the driver part. And then we have the Philips Fidelio X2s and X2HRs, which are basically the same in comfort. Very good head strap. It's not as good as the SHPs because the SHP probably has more padding and it's also a lighter headphone. But these are definitely the better velour ear pads of the headphones that use velour. Another headphone that I like the velour on is the AKG, and the AKG has a very light clamp force. The head strap, since this headphone is not the best quality, but because it's a pretty light headphone, the head strap gets the job done. And then we have the Sennheiser 560S. Like I said before, this headband here, the velour is a bit softer and a little bit higher quality velour. So I actually like this headband more than the other Sennheisers. And then the ear pads are basically the same as these three. And it's also a very light headphone, so that's why I knocked it up a notch to B tier. And then the Koss KSC75s, I wanted to put those in C tier, but I didn't have any room. Those are very comfortable for like the first 1 or 2 hours, but then after the ear clips sit on top of my ear, you do start to feel it. I tend to have it more of an issue on one ear though. But when you first put them on, it's like you're not wearing anything. And then we have the Monoprice M1060C in open. These have actually S tier ear pads. Like these are by far my favorite ear pads in my opinion. Nice big plush soft ear pads to fit around your ear and good clamp force as well. The only problem is that they have an F tier leather head strap. This head strap is terrible. Like it's F tier for sure. You get a hot spot right in the top of the middle of your head and it's really bad. Like you probably won't be able to wear that for very long. Now the good news is you can buy something like a ZMF pilot pad, and if you do that, then that would move this headphone up to like A tier, for example, or high B, at least. And then we have the Sennheisers. I kind of just explained those. The headbands aren't as good quality as the 560, and the ear pads are basically the same, very light headphone. And then we have the Hi-Fi Mins. Now, these two are kind of the same on the ear pads. The main difference is the Edition XX is better because it has swivel, while the Nanda doesn't. And I would say out of the box, this has a little more clamp force. But this uses a head strap, while this is a headband. And I prefer the head strap over this headband. And then I rank the HE6 lower because my ear does touch the driver. And they use round ear pads that don't exactly fit around your ear too well. And then we have the Sendy Iva. By far the worst head strap. Well, not the worst. The Monoprice is worse, but they're probably the second worst. And that's part of that is that this head strap is just too thin and it's too narrow, and the headphone weighs a little too much, so it just doesn't really support the top of my head too well. And then the ear pads are good quality, but they're shaped a little bit weird. But it's still kind of like a C tier headphone. It takes a little while getting used to how that feels. The same thing with these egg-shaped Hi-Fi Mins. They're a little weird when you put them on. Kind of same thing with the Koss, I would say. And then I rank these Sennheisers lower because they're a little heavier than these three. The quality velour on these are a little bit better, but the main reason why I ranked, like, let's say the 58X lower is simply because this foam that's inside the ear pad touches my ear. So you get this really fuzzy, like, claustrophobic feeling, and I don't like that. And honestly, these three, I actually kind of like the headbands better on these cheaper. So even though the quality is lower, they actually feel more comfortable. That's where the 560 comes in because that's actually higher quality, but just as actually more comfortable, though. And then we have the DT1990. Yeah, the headband is pretty uncomfortable. The clamp force is pretty tight out of the box. Not as bad as the 6XX though, and that's why I put the 6XX in E tier. I knocked it down a notch because out of the box the clamp force is ridiculous. And then the L2, pretty bad headband as well. These ear pads are very small, so they're almost on ear, so that's why that's an E tier. And then the 4XX, that's an E tier because it's a leather ear pads, but the part that touches your face is like some type of rug material. It's like some type of fabric that's like extremely itchy. It's like extremely fuzzy and it's extremely itchy. And I can't stand the comfort on that because of how itchy the ear pads are. And I can't stand the comfort on the 6XXs because of the clamp force. And then we have the F tier. Well, this pretty much explains itself. Same headband as the L2s, so not very comfortable. And then these are actually on ear. And that pretty much explains why that headphone's not really that comfortable. And we have the Monoprice Retros. Well, they're really bad build quality. So of course the ear pads and the leather head strap is extremely stiff and firm and just not comfortable. So that basically explains comfort. So let's go ahead and move on to sound quality. I do want to point out that this is my opinion, and also I want to point out Sound quality can be based off a number of factors. So things like imaging, soundstage, clarity, detail, instrument separation, layering, dynamics, sub-bass extension, treble extension, bass, mids, treble, yada yada yada, timbre, out of the box tuning, and so on and so on. So just keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and just name the headphones, and then I'm going to give you a price to performance or a recommendations list. So at the top of the list we have the Hi-Fi-Man HE6SE V1. You can now get the V2s now, which will have better stock tuning, by the way. So you won't really necessarily need EQ. But in terms of sound quality, that's at the top of the list. Hi-Fi-Man Ananda and the Hi-Fi-Man Edition XX. And then in A tier, I put the Focal Lear, or the Focal Legia, and then the Focal Lear, and then the Koss ESP95X. In B tier, we have the Monoprice M1060C and the Monoprice M1060 Opens. My original Philips Fidelio X2s. Now, mind you, there's like several different revisions of that headphone, so you don't know if you're going to get a good quality, because if you get a bad quality one, or one that's tuned really weird, like the X2HR, the X2HR is tuned more like what the original X2s were originally going for, but the one that I got was actually really good. So this one's a D tier, but that's a B tier. It's really weird. Bayer DT1990 Pros in B tier, Sendiivas in B tier. And then we have in C tier, so we have the Mr. Speakers Open Aeon Flows, the Fostech T50 RPs, which with just replaced stock ear pads, so not modified, just replaced ear pads. AKG K7XXs, Sennheiser 560Ss, and Sennheiser 660Ss. Now these are the two best performing Sennheisers in my opinion. And then we have the Philips Fidelio L2s, which I would take over these X2HRs in terms of sound quality. And then we have the Sennheiser 58X, Sennheiser 6XX, 4XX, SHP 9500s, Sennheiser 598s, 558s, Koss KSC 75s, the Sennheiser 518s in E tier, and then in F tier we have the Philips Fidelio M1 MK2s in F, and the Monoprice Retros in F tier in terms of sound quality. Now these two headphones down here, they do have two redeeming factors. So for example, the Monoprice Retros, you can improve the sound if you change the ear pads. But let's just say stock wise, yeah, they're pretty bad. Two things that are redeeming is has, quite a bit of bass emphasis, and very good soundstage for the money though. But other than that, the sound quality is it's mediocre. And then the MK1, MK2 sound quality is also mediocre. But I would say there's one redeeming factor of this headphone is it actually has some good sub bass, so you get good rumble and whatnot. But otherwise, these are F tier headphones. So, anywho's, let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and give you my recommendations now. So, under 700, any of these three are a good choice, but I would recommend you get the HE6 V2 at Adorama for 550. But these other ones are alright as well. And then in A tier, I would recommend the Focal Lear and the Koss ESP95X for around 400. Now there is one major caveat, is that both of these headphones actually broke on me. The Koss was brand new, probably had it less than 24 hours, and it stopped working. One of the drivers went out, or I wouldn't actually say went out. Actually, it didn't go out. It sounds distorted. So maybe there's maybe dust got in it, or maybe there was a hair in it from the factory. As for the Focal Lears, I had those for about 2 years, and was a daily driver that I used the headphone daily, pretty much. Had it for like 2 years, and then the left driver went out. I did buy some security bits, but they're too small for my fingers, so I had to buy a screwdriver, and I'm going to open up the headphone, and I'm hoping it's just a loose wire. But as of right now, both of those headphones would be recommendations, but they both broke on me. So I want to point that out. So under $400, so closer to $200 basically, because I don't recommend the Bayer DT1990s. Spend less money and get a Sennheiser 560S. It's definitely the best performing Sennheiser. And then Sendiivas also, not worth the money. And then the Mr. Speakers Aeon Flow for 400. Yeah, if you value comfort and build quality, then it's worth it. But if you value sound quality, it's not worth it for the Mr. speakers. Spend less money and get a 560S, because this actually does some things just as good or even better. So for example, some of the things it does better, dynamics and clarity does better. And some of the things it does definitely does worse is the bass is very lean. Well, this is a very warm and bassy headphone. Now you can just EQ and put some, give this a bass boost though. But this is like $170, and also if you get it used, you can pay like $100 for it. So yeah. And then the M1060C around 200 is a good deal, but they have the newer ones out now. So they have the 1070 and the 1570 out, and they even have a closed version now as well. And those are like $300-$400. So maybe check those out instead of maybe the Focal Lear or the Koss ESP9 5X. And then I would recommend the Fostech 250 RPs. Just mind you, you'll have to spend extra money if you want to replace the ear pads, which you're most likely going to do. And then it's up to you if you want to get them modded, so that's like another $100. And if you also want to get them balanced, that's another $100 right there. So this ends up being like a $300 to $400 headphone at that point. And if you just get the ear pads, let's say if you buy the headphone used for like $50 to $75 and you get the ear pads, then it's like a $100 to $150 headphone. And that's a pretty solid headphone. And then the AKG, it's like a $200 headphone used. You probably get it like about $100. And yeah, I would recommend it. Philips Fidelio L2 is probably the hidden gem here of all the headphones. They actually still sell this brand new. I actually checked it. It was like $100 on Amazon or something like that. And then used, you can get one for like $50, $75. Not bad. Not a bad deal. Especially if you want like warm, bassy, and soundstage. And you want good build quality, but the comfort kind of sucks. So maybe you want to add like a ZMF pilot pad to this, and then maybe change out the ear pads to something else. And then yeah, you got a good solid headphone. And then the X2HRs, yeah, they're pretty mediocre. The 560S is just better than the 58X if you keep the 58X stock. 6XX is it's an underwhelming, kind of an overhyped headphone. I like the tuning on the 6XX, but it's not great, like in terms of sound quality. I just don't recommend it. Same thing with 4XX, don't recommend. SHP 9500, I like the L2s better, or my original X2s better, so I'd rather get those two over that. And then these two Sennheisers actually have decent performance, but for around, if you buy these used, because they don't sell these anymore, buy these used for like $50, you'd be better off spending $50 more to get a 560S. Or get an AKG for $100, or get this for $50 and then maybe also modify it, or maybe get this for $50, or maybe even get this, the X2. If you can get a good version, get that for $50. So I don't really recommend these. And then the Koss KSC 75s, they're actually really good sound quality for only $10, $15. So yeah, I would recommend them. So it's either, so yeah. And then you have the 518s, it's the same thing as these two. And then these two I don't recommend at all. So back to my recommendations, get the Hi-Fiman or these two, and then if you're going to spend about $200, get an M1060C or an M1060 Open. If you're going to spend less than $200, so you can spend around $100, you can either get the Fostech, the AKG, the 560, the L2s, and then if you're going to spend less than that, so if you're going to spend like $10, $15, then you get the Koss KSC 75s. And that's basically my headphone tier list. Actually, before I go, some of these headphones do need a little EQ, like the HE6, it does need a little EQ. Elegia's definitely, I don't like it out of the box. Stock, it's kind of eh. The M1060C, the tuning on that, it is a little weird. DT1990, yeah, you need a little bit of EQ. 560, like, yeah, the bass is lean on that, but, just give it a bass boost. And then, like, the Fostech T50RP is stock. The treble is ridiculous, so you need to replace the ear pads on that and whatnot. But headphones that I personally like a lot are those recommendations. Now, I will say, I do tend to lean towards like warmer headphones. So for example, Edition XX, because there's an air gap at the bottom, I get more bass and more warmth. Focalier is definitely more warm than the Allegia. Allegia is kind of dry. The HE6 is also kind of dry. That requires some warmth. This is a little warm. Not really though. M1060C is warm. Uh, you know, like that. That's bright. This is warm. This is kind of warm if depending on the ear pads that you choose. This is warm. This is not warm. This is warm because that upper bass as well. 6XXs are warm, and the 518s are warm. So those are the headphones I tend to prefer in terms of like stock tuning. Is I tend to lean more towards the warmer type of headphones. Probably now in terms of headphones that aren't warm, I like the Nanda's tuning stock. I like the Koss tuning stock. I like the original X2s that I had. I don't like this. Sendiivas are okay. Fostex are okay. 560S's, like I said, those are like flat in the bass and like very lean sounding. So you do need a bass boost, but I do like those headphones. But otherwise, yeah, that's my headphone tier list. I'm already going on a little too long, so I'm gonna end it here. So thanks for watching.